So we're playing 100 NL for this hand. A good player opens to 2.5x in the small blind. He's opening 89% of all hands in the small blind over a 19 trial sample. So out of 19, he's opened 17 times. I'm just going to call here. My hand is too strong to 3-bet pre, and if I 3-bet, I can't 5-bet, so flatting is really clear. I'm going to use my position, being cognizant of what his raise first percentage is. So we flop well, middle pair on a King-Jack-8 board. He c-bets a reasonable size and we call. Now the turn brings another 8 and a flush draw, and villain bets again. What we can distill from this is that he's very unlikely to have an 8 for two reasons. One is that it's hard to have an 8. There are 2 on the board already. The second is that if there any hand he doesn't bet on the flop, it's an ace-8 or jack-5 type hand. So if he has any check call range at all on this flop, it's hands of that middle strength nature. On the other hand, while it is unlikely for him to have 8s, we can have a lot of 8s. We've done nothing to show that we can't have an 8 where he has done something to show that he can't, that being betting the flop. He is firing the second time with an 89% raise first percentage. So he's just going to have a lot of 3 out, 4 out, 2 out, or no out type hands versus us here. One consideration is that I don't think this villain is going to 3-barrel here as a bluff. So we're not going to be losing value by raising that we could be extracting by calling river here, by calling turn and calling river. So if we do end up raising this turn, we're not sacrificing a bet on the river that we could get by inducing a further bluff by just calling. Further raising is going to charge any equity he has in the form of a draw, mainly if he picked up a flush draw on the turn or if he has a gut shot or a straight draw. We're taking control of the hand versus that part of his range. And lastly, but most importantly, sure, we're going to fold out all those air hands and all those double barrels with weak draws by representing this turn texture, but we put him in an awful spot with a hand like ace-jack or king-5, especially when with this turn raise we threaten to open it up on the river as well. He's going to look at ace-jack here and say, this is not a good spot for my ace-jack. And he would be correct in that. So we don't expect to see a lot of rivers given how many weak holdings he fires on this turn, but the times we do, we still have recourse of the bluffing variety and some equity to boot. So I think this is a really good spot to be in. So in each of these examples, we didn't need villain to necessarily be an amazing hand reader to pull these off. Our play was largely dictated by the facts on the ground, his raise first percentage from the spot, his barreling tendencies, the board texture, our hand and its equity as a bluff catcher or showdown hand, and so on. In examples later in this series, we'll see where we need villain to be a hand reader of sorts to be able to pull off a bluff of this nature, or we'll face the inevitability of being doomed to fail from the start. So to reiterate that concept, notice in these 3 hands that I didn't get out of line before I got out of line. I didn't make any unreasonable peel on a previous street before turning my hand into a bluff. I never called with intentions of bluffing the turn. I call the flop thinking that I have a showdown hand, a hand that has a lot of showdown value and value as a bluff catcher, and I'm willing to turn my hand into a bluff on certain turns in certain situations. Our other concept, relative or real showdown value versus fake or absolute showdown value, in hands 1 and 2 we certainly had enough real showdown value to call turn. And in hand 3, we had more than enough real showdown value. We had an abundancy of real showdown value in hand 3. But in all cases, we decided that we had more bluff equity, and therefore chose to take the bluff route instead of the showdown route. Now again, in parts 2 and 3, we will see some hands where we have a strong holding, such as top pair, top kicker, that actually only has fake showdown value. And in those cases, our hand will be forced, so to speak, between folding and raising, as calling in those cases ceases to become tenable. So again, when you're trying to evaluate these situations, evaluate your hand relative to the range your opponent has. If your opponent's entire range is 2 pair or better to bet, then having top pair, top kicker doesn't mean very much, just as if your opponent has only flushes, then having a straight doesn't mean very much.